I've used weed for over a decade, and after all of those years, I can more than happily say that I quit and I'm done with it. I got into the cannabis industry while I was using it, and the closer I got to it, the more questions that I started asking that didn't really add up to the answers that I was really looking for. But over time, I learned that not everybody was as serious to it as I was. I wasn't just some guy that was a user and abuser that wanted to just sell weed. I was someone who wanted to truly understand it down to a chemical stance, all the way down to each compound that was involved in it, from different types of terpenes that can affect you in a essential oil kind of sense, all the way down to every cannabinoid and receptor that your body used that it attached to. And I originally supported every single medicinal thing that I could possibly find on the plant, all the way from legalization to growing to personal use. And I really didn't understand what the hype was until I started actually asking those questions of what I was really doing it for and what was the right thing. The medicinal benefits weren't really adding up whenever I was having my own personal use as well as other people's stories, and the culture around it was kind of just that you smoke and you chill. And that wasn't always the case. Sometimes I felt frantic after taking some just because of the amount or potency that I was ingesting, or even if it wasn't even legally tested. Some of the places around the area that I'm at, and what I've heard from other people, is that not all of these testing labs are even legit. Sometimes they can even be paid off by the owners of a certain grow or by a dispensary just so that they can get it in their stores so they can pocket some cash off of somebody. I just find that completely and utterly wrong. And that was just one of the things that I noticed that was completely messed up inside of this industry. And that was the lies that went around the entire subject. People normalized high dosage use, and it became a certain normalcy for people to realize that they didn't want anything that wasn't high dose. Everybody's looking for a numbers game at this point. I get so many customers that come in and just ask me, what's the highest that you have? That's all I need. And it completely changes the whole way and sense that this should all work. It should be for medicinal use, not just for a high. And THC is entirely what builds that high. Cannabinoids and terpenes are what can help you on a medicinal sense. And no matter how hard I tried pushing that for these customers that I've had, it didn't even matter. There's certain few were actually reasonable people and understood that I was trying to help them, but other people almost copped an attitude with me just because I was trying to do the right thing. And I guess that's just a normal thing with society now, that if you're doing the right thing, there's going to be your haters and you're not always going to be able to make friends with everybody. But that's not what I was trying to do. I just wanted to make right with people. And that's something that I've been trying to do for my entire life. And whenever it comes to being in this industry, that's not a normal thing to people, I guess. And the only normal thing that is in this is that the heavy use is a common thing. People always have a dependency on a day to day when I work, and there's so many issues within the industry that involve day to day use or the addiction alone. And that's something that not enough people talk about when it comes to this sort of substance, is that it can be abused and it can very much so be very addictive. When people build this common dependency on it, it's almost like they tell themselves that they need it instead of just trying without it. And it builds this sort of codependency that if you don't have it, it almost puts you in a panic mode. And then, even whenever you do smoke it, in my own experience, I've even had panic attacks because I took a break and then decided to try it again and realized that it really wasn't a good thing for me. It was building this dependency that was making me sick to my head and sick to my stomach constantly. And that wasn't necessarily what I was trying to do. In fact, it was the opposite of what I was looking for. And that's a huge problem in the industry. Most people think it's going to be a fix everything button or a fix everything drug, I suppose, and that's not what it's going to do for you. People are using it to avoid the deeper issues or the rooted cause of what their problems are. And instead of facing those things, it's almost like everyone's just running away from them by using this. And that's not a good thing for all of society or even just your internal personal health. And that's where my perspective changed on it, was really where people were building this dependency and almost taking their anger out on me, the salesman, just because I'm trying to help them. And they thought that they were just helping themselves more than what I could possibly provide for them when it comes to the science. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything, or even just tell them that they were wrong or didn't know. I was just trying to be that guy that was informative and gave them the what was to know in the industry. And some people even had questions upon it whenever they'd visit me, and other people just got offended just because I'd throw out a shout. And whenever I was a user of it, I would always be suggesting different products and different types of strains so that I could maybe help someone out because it was something that worked for me. And that's an unfortunate circumstance when it comes to this sort of industry. Not everything's going to work the same for other people. It's going to be different for everybody. It's almost like when you go to an ice cream shop and you have your favorite flavor and someone else has their favorite flavor, but you just hate it and the other person hates yours. It's not always going to be the same, but a lot of people think that it is. And whenever it comes to quitting, it's not going to be the same for everybody either. Some people are going to find horrible different addictions that are going to turn them away from weed, but turn them into a different kind of addict to something that's even worse or maybe just not as bad. But regardless, you have to get rid of something if you're picking something else up. And for me, that turns into drinking more water, working hard, working out, or even just doing things with my money that I was spending when it comes to buying things like these products. That's investing for me. And it has completely changed everything for my life and built me into a correct path that I'm more happy with and that I can be proud to see that I've built something for my future and I can rely on later. And I've spent so much money in this industry that I genuinely did not believe how much I was missing out on when it comes to saving up money or investing until I did quit. And quitting wasn't easy at all for me. I had turned back on it so many different times. I've probably told myself that I was going to quit maybe 4 or 5 times within the span of a decade of me using it. And until this recent time in the last year, I had turned back to it every single time. And it was something that completely changed whenever I realized what was actually affecting me when it comes to being a user of it. And that was my own health. I'd constantly turn to it thinking that it was for the better for myself all the time whenever I was using it. And every time I'd use it, I'd suppress my emotions, go back into my apartment that I was living at or the house that I was living at before, and I would just hide from all of my issues instead of facing them and trying to do something better with my life. All the stomach pains and the mind fogginess and the questions that I had were never answered. They were constantly just suppressed or even made worse just because I decided to smoke again or because I felt like I wasn't getting enough. So I just increased my dosage, whether it be a gummy, a cartridge, or even dabs in a concentrated form. And that wasn't good for me at all. It was also such a waste of money that I realized that I wasn't doing anything good for myself at this point. I was genuinely just degrading my own body and my own habits into a way that made my life worse and miserable for me. And working in the industry made me realize so much more beyond what I possibly could have imagined whenever I wasn't. I started realizing that the taxes that we pay within the industry are so much higher than almost every other job that I've ever had. On top of that, I didn't even get told that my taxes weren't being taken out of my paycheck because a lot of these places are pretty unprofessional. The main thing that they're focused on is making money for themselves and buying more weed and just re upping on that same mindset. And that wasn't something that I felt safe or like a solid component to my own income or my health at the time. And I had to take control of the reins immediately. I changed my tax situation and I realized how screwed up the entire industry was when it comes to money in itself. Although it is state legal, it's not federally legal yet. So all the money from any sort of FDIC bank that's federally insured, you can't get a loan from. So you don't have counted income, but you're constantly being taxed out of your ass for it. And that was something that I completely hated in this industry. Why couldn't I spend my money on buying a home or buying a car loan if I was earning it from a job that was technically legal in my state? Well, that's because when you're getting a loan, it has to be federally approved. And it wasn't a federally approved source of income, so they would constantly say that my income was technically not counted. Not only was that a big problem for me when it comes to trying to buy a new car, even if I wanted to buy a home at the time, But it was also a problem for my financial life because I wasn't having my income tracked, it was untraced, and it was technically not legal. So I felt like I was committing all the crimes that they said not to do while growing up, being a drug dealer, and then just not being taken seriously. And I hated that feeling. I've always wanted to be taken as if I was some sort of person that was of importance. And what I was understanding and receiving at the time of trying to get a loan was that I was none of those things. I was just some commoner drug addict and drug dealer that wasn't worth anything or even the time or money to even keep track of. I felt like I was replaceable in a sense that was making me miserable, even far beyond what I could possibly imagine at that time. And this led to me getting a new job and trying to make another source of income that actually counted for me because I didn't want to feel trapped. I wanted to feel like I was actually worth the time and the money to take care of, as well as someone who earned benefits. And that's a huge part of working at most jobs, what people have nowadays. Most people are looking for benefits or insurances that are backed and covered for them, their family, sometimes even their animals. And these jobs don't provide that at all. Most of these places are cash businesses too, so under the table money is a constant, consistent thing. And it doesn't always end up in your hands or in the right person's hands either. And a lot of these people don't understand how to take care of things legally, so they're constantly doing back end stuff that just doesn't make sense for anybody except for themselves because it makes their life easier. I hated that. It was always something that constantly made me have to do more, but they got to do less. And they were the ones making more money. That's not necessarily how things should work, especially in a workplace like this where you can make this kind of money and none of it will end up in your pocket anyway. Most people are paid on an hourly sense, except for, of course, like most, the owners or some management get like a salary pay, but it doesn't necessarily add up to where how lucrative these businesses can be, but how much money actually ends up in anyone's pockets besides a hidden person. And that's the biggest issue with this. There's so many different names that are constantly be thrown around and different taxes that are constantly taken out of the industry. And we always wonder, where does our money go? Millions of dollars are constantly just disappearing from state regulatory systems or even federal regulatory systems, and we don't even know what's happening with the money anymore. It's almost just vanishing off of the face of the planet when it comes to this business. And people like to make it out that you make a ton of money and you don't have to worry about any sort of problems because it's medically legal or recreationally legal in the state. But that's not the case in this industry. There's lies, there's provisions, there's hidden names, there's people of power that we don't know about, and there's taxes galore. And there's nothing you can really do about it. You can't just try to take it up to your state or have a whole bunch of signatures because it's such a poised industry that it's literally just radiating some sort of hatefulness or some sort of arrogance when it comes to it. People feel like they know more. People understand it on a level that some don't. And some people are just straight up addicted to it. And it's ridiculous because so many people have an us versus them mentality whenever it comes to just weed in itself. People compare it to things like alcohol in a way that just doesn't make sense or has no relativity. And there's always some polarizing thing that has to do with it. And it's always going to turn into something political when it really should just turn into the freedom of the people as well as the freedom of science to be able to prove what's right and what's wrong. But that's never what it ever leads to. It constantly just comes back down to some sort of lucrative system where they're looking for one thing and one thing only. That's cash and that's money. And I understand that it's a very, very capitalist topic, but at the same time, it shouldn't necessarily be seen as that. If it's technically meant for medical use, then that's what it should be completely propagated to. Only medical use and the understanding of how medicinally it can benefit people. Or if it's just recreational use, then fine. I understand the capitalist mindset and the business mindset. People are trying to make money and people are trying to use it for fun, just in the same like alcohol is. But we've got to draw a certain line at some point where we can actually understand and see the difference and be able to prove all the numbers behind it that back all of these things too. And I know, at least in my state, that they're constantly trying to say that they're smashing down on all the illegal activity that's going on within it. But they also need to be upping the antics when it comes to taking care of testing facilities as well as disposal facilities on things that shouldn't be released to the public. Because I already know that tons of illegal product and unsafe product are constantly being dished out every single day, and people are being hospitalized by these things. We can't just act like there's no sort of dancing monkey in the room when it comes to this. It's not always a safe thing to be inhaling something that's on fire, or even ingesting something that's of a high dose of a literal drug that is meant to get you high. But beyond that point, there's not much that I can really do except for put word out there and try to convince people otherwise and to keep their safety in mind. And if you did enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate you leaving a like and a subscribe as well as a comment